Hey, welcome back to Fire Engineering's Humpday Hangout and to our show, The Issues and Challenges. In today's fire service, I'm Chief Rick Lasky, along with my good friend and Humpday Hangout co-host, Louisville Assistant Chief Terry McGrath. And as always, we're joined by our Humpday Hangout team. That's Chief John Salka and Chief Bobby Halton will be here momentarily. We're going to be missing Chief Scott Thompson today. Scott's out of town, but he will be back for our next show. That's guaranteed. We've got another great show lined up for you today. And we are being joined by our very good friend, Chief Butch Cobb. Butch, he's been a great friend to John Salka and myself and Chief Halton for a long time. We'll give you a little background information on Chief Cobb in a second here. We do this every show as a reminder. If you have any questions, zip over to Twitter and send them our way. Our producer, Pete, will make sure we know about them if we don't see them. Make sure to add hashtag FE Talk, Frank Edward Talk. Today our topic is fire in America, there's about 10 different things, 10 different directions that we're going to probably go with this particular topic, with having Chief Cobb with us. But while we're waiting for Chief Halton, welcome back, guys. Welcome, Chief Cobb. Well, Butchie.
Thank you very much. I'm honored to be sitting here. It's like I'm in the sitting in the court of the Knights of the Round Table here, and I'm just I'm a guy just standing by.
Well, I know next time I'm in Arizona, I know which room I'm hitting, John. Look what I could add to my collection. Look above Butch's head. Those would look really nice in my office here with all my other front pieces and helmets and that. So,
yeah, that with all the helmet shields behind was one of the greatest gifts I ever got. My wife put it together. It's got a shield from every company I worked in Jersey City in every rank through the years. And John was out visiting once here, and he pointed to him and he said, from the one on the end that's all dark, engine 20, to the one to chief operations, he said, every time I went up in rank, the face shield got cleaner.
And I remember we just talked about it with John Norman. I remember when he got promoted off of Rescue 1 to battalion chief, and he had the new helmet. And I said, really, it's kind of clean. He goes, Rick, the helmet don't make the firefighter. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. You don't have to have something dirty to be well, John, real quick, before I do, before I go a little bit through Butch's bio, you've known Butch how long, John? I mean, forever, it seems like.
Forever. Seems like forever. I mean, it seems like he's been alive forever. And then I know him a period shorter than that.
Well, let me do that. Let me do this, Butch, for our, and I'm so, this is so exciting to introduce you to our viewers and listeners, because some listen to this. Robert Butch Cobb served with the Jersey City, New Jersey Fire Department for 34 years. During his career with the department, Butch served as a firefighter and captain in some of the busiest units, that being Engine 20, Engine 22, Ladder 5, and Rescue 1, the Rescue 1 there. And if some of our fans, some of our followers, some of our friends, if you know Jersey City, you know they fight a lot of fires. So after his promotion to battalion chief, the department assigned Chief Cobb commanded a 2nd battalion. Upon his promotion to deputy chief, the department appointed him chief of operations. Butch also held the positions of chief of training, citywide tour commander, and deputy coordinator of OEM and Homeland Security. After retiring, Chief Cobb joined ISO in 2009 as Director of Community Hazard Mitigation and ISO's key spokesperson to the nation's fire service. In 2010, Butch's promotion to National Director gave him increased responsibilities for directing ISO's public fire protection information gathering and analysis process, which John and I always talk. We love the data. We love the statistics, not the hurt feelings and all that stuff. We want the real stuff, including also all field operations, fire suppression rating schedule, the building code effectiveness grading schedule, and the community rating system flood program. In addition, and most of us on this panel, when Chief Halton joins us as well, in addition to his career fire department experience, he was a volunteer firefighter and past fire chief of District 4, West Milford Township, New Jersey Fire Department, and past chief of the Dumont, New Jersey Fire Department. And this is where Butch, and I don't want to embarrass him, but he knows this is coming because I say this every time I see him. Butch is one of my heroes for a lot of reasons, for what he did in the fire service, but for his service in Vietnam. Butch served with the 1st Aviation Brigade in Vietnam from 1968 to 1969. And John, you've always said it before, he's got a chest full of medals that he would never tell you about, but he's definitely, I know he's a hero to John, Salka, and I. So Butchie, welcome to the show, brother. I love you, pal.
Hey, thanks for having me here. This is one of the nicest things that have happened to me in a long time. I've always watched you guys, and thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Well, we've been trying. Excuse me, Terry. How many times have we talked where John has said, John has been just like, I went through my Humpday Hangout folder, and there must be 7 or 8 emails from John going, we got to get Butchie on. We got to get Butchie on. I was just talking to Butch, and I know every time I talk to you, we get going on numbers and things and stuff, and and it's just that's why, what a wonderful opportunity to have you with us today, Butch. So let's do this. Let's jump into this. We're talking. We talked about fire in America, and that's a topic Terry and I chose just for, because we're going to talk about some numbers. We're going to talk about getting back in and fighting. Well, I shouldn't say getting back in, because a lot of us never stop getting inside and fighting fires. I guess, Butch, before we get before you get to some of the numbers that I want to talk about, John and Terry, John brings up in class, almost every class we teach, Butchie, he talks about, my good friend Butch Cobb has said it, and he gives you credit for the quote all the time, that there has never been a civilian rescued from a burning building, right, John? That a firefighter didn't have to go in and rescue. You've got to go inside. And John, you've talked about that umpteen times.
Right. And listen, and there's a better way to say it, because the way Butch said it was, there's only one way to rescue a civilian that's inside a burning building, and that is to go in and find them and remove them. And of course, we're not saying that hose lines don't help when you knock the fire down and control the building and reduce the temperatures. But there's only one way to save them. That is to go in and get them. You can knock down the fire from inside, from outside, any way you want. And you know what? They don't roll over and go back to sleep and wake up the next morning and say, wow, that was a close call. You still got to go in and get them. And I repeat that all the time. That is, nobody can deny that or argue it, period.
Yeah, absolutely. So Butch, let's talk about, you brought something up about kind of looking at our fire service's current mission when it comes to life safety, especially pertaining to structural fires. And I know you're very passionate about this, and I love the fact that you can back it up with the numbers. A lot of people can't do it. A lot of people out there in the social media world, Butch, that just spout off and say things. But I love the fact, with your background, especially with ISO, that you can just go, here, let me give you the facts. Let me give you the numbers. And we've talked about this plenty of times, haven't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And when I went over to ISO, I walked into one of the biggest data worlds you can believe. They're one of the largest companies in the world for the amount of data that they have. And I was always a little leery, but as I started to travel around the country and meet with the actuarial people and meet with some of the big insurers and look at the data, it proved to me beyond a reasonable doubt that data is important in the fire service. And it just, when I started to look at things like training, if a fire department did a lot of training and the right training and followed the NFPA, if the deployment to fires was good, when we did our deployment analysis, if staffing was good, responding to fires, all that data proved that they're the three of the 4 biggest things that makes a fire department, in the eyes of the insurance industry and in the eyes of ISO, a good fire department. So, and it just, you can't, there's no way to, there's no science, no scientist can come up and say, well, that's not true. It's based on hundreds of thousands of fires over the years through the United States, looking at the same fires of a fire department that's staffed with 3 people and take 5 minutes to get there. You look at the same type of fire with a well-staffed fire department, a well-trained, well-deployed fire department. And the bottom line is the same fire in those 2 fire departments. When there is a fire, the insurance company gives this guy on the right, who's not well-trained, not well-staffed, not well-deployed, a much larger check than the fire department on the left. And that's really the layman's way of explaining the data that ISO collects. And it's unrefuted. And the more I saw of it, And it's also water and communications, and they look at the infrastructure of your community. But once I did a deep dive into it and started traveling around speaking to chiefs and all over the country, it's unrefuted data. If you have now, one thing I want to say real quick, ISO grades everything. They take data all the way up until the fire trucks arrive at the scene. They do not, and they never will, grade strategy and tactics. So when you do see a fire department at the class 2 or even a class 1, and they have a catastrophic fire, it's not, everything up until that point was perfect. They followed the NFPA standards. They trained everybody. They had good water, et cetera, et cetera. But strategy and tactics is just not something they'll ever get into.
Well, and Butch, that's was my point was everybody on this panel, everybody on our team, we love real life, like the statistics, the stuff. Bobby talks about it, not the fairy tales, not the make believe, not someone's emotional, and you can't argue. You really can't argue. I mean, I know there's that phrase out there, liars figure, figures lie, but the statistics you're talking about, especially, when I read your bio, of just what you did with ISO after all your years, 34 years with Jersey City, especially the director of community hazard mitigation and the spokesperson. But when you got promoted to the national director, responsible directing ISO's public response for dealing with and redirecting ISO's public fire protection information gathering and analysis process, all field operations, fire special. I mean, the whole thing. You've got the stuff. And one of the things in the numbers, one of the things, Butch, I talk about is it's frustrating. And we talked about this the other day, a couple of us on the phone. When you go to help a fire chief out, she's trying to get a new firehouse with some people, and they stand up in front of the city council, Butch, and they're looking for more people to staff the new firehouse. And a city councilman says, well, Chief Cobb, according to my, or not Chief Cobb, Chief Jones, according to my research here, fires are down in the United States, and you're asking for more people in another station. And historically, and it's frustrating. You hear a fire chief go, well, council member or councilman, we're the, you got to look at we're the insurance policy that you never want to use. I'm like, really? That's what you're still saying? We're the insurance policy? And what they should be coming back and correct us if I'm wrong, Butch, is, fires are down if you want to compare them to the heydays of the 70s and 80s. But if you want to look at the past 20 years, and then if you want to add up, I think you've talked about several times, add up all the money, all the dollar lost to natural disasters each and every one of those years, then add up all the money lost due to fires. Almost, not every year, but almost every year, fires are like dollar lost to fires is up here, and the rest. That should be your argument, is maybe the numbers are down, but the dollar loss to fire is almost at a record high, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. Up until the hurricane hit the New York City area, for as long as they've been keeping data, fires were the number one, always at the top of the list for property damage, always, far and away. And then after Sandy hit the New York City area, because of the area that it hit, even more than Florida, water and wind took over. But when you look at them for 25, 30 years, it was always fires. We just don't have a really good record in putting out fires. And if you looked at the rate of loss, it's actually higher now for property loss than it was 15, 20 years ago. And that kind of leads us into the other part of it, Rick, and I don't want to get away from the property damage, because it's an important piece of it. Because when you put your hand up and you say, I swear to, when you're a rookie fireman and it's swearing you in, you say save lives and protect property. Sometimes I think we kind of forget that second part of our oath. But the other part of it, saving lives, and the data that I get from a lot of different sources, but the death rate per 1,000 people in the United States right now is 15% higher than it was in 1980, when we had a lot of structure fires. And the injuries of civilians inside a burning building is 34% higher since 1980. And you got to stop and wonder, when you look at, we're having a lot less fires, but when you look at the rate within 1,000 people, why it's almost like more people are dying now in building fires than ever before. And, I talked to John about this a lot. I mean, you got to wonder why. And I know there's things like, material and et cetera, but still, it makes me think, what are we changing? Are we changing everything for the good, or are we changing things to make it safer for the firefighters? I mean, I'm going to go into some statistics about we've become an incredibly safe profession, believe it or not, when it comes to firefighters going inside a burning building to put it out and to save lives. COVID and everything, we're going to be in the hundreds, maybe a couple hundred this year, and rightly so. Firemen are responding. They didn't stop responding because of COVID, but I did the deep dive into structure fires, and it's some of the things that I came up with. We're really a safe profession now. It's not like the 70s when 70, 75 guys were getting, guys and girls, getting trapped in buildings. It's different, but I'd like to kind of delve into what people think of the reasons are that fires are down, but the rate of people getting killed at fires is up. And the other thing is 80%, almost 80% of those people die in their homes, in their bedrooms, and in their living rooms, and in their dining rooms. So it's not like, we're looking at big commercial buildings. 80% of the deaths are in somebody's house.
Well, one of the questions came up, somebody posted on Facebook, I think a guy named JJ, would that go with houses being built cheaper nowadays? You mentioned building materials, and, and you're exactly right. We've all talked about it. Heck, we were just at FDIC and again, got to witness firsthand state-of-the-art equipment on the exhibit floors. Every one of us can remember what it was like, years and years ago, the turnout gear that we had, and where we've come from there to now, and SCBA and equipment and training and everything. I mean, there is what really, and Bobby knows this, when I review articles for Bobby and Diane or classes, there was a couple classes for this next FDIC, when somebody starts off, and Bobby and I've talked about this if they can't even get the line from Backdraft right, where, they go to see 2,000 years of tradition. I go, no, it was a piece of paper on the wall in a firehouse in a movie that said 150 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. And Steve Chickaros is our good friend. And I explained to Chief when I did a blog for Bobby a while back, said, I called it that. And I said, the ultimate insult. I think firefighters are some of the most progressive people I know. Look at paramedicine nowadays. Walk on the apparatus floor. Look at our turnout gear. Look at how everything we do, and the fire service is one of the most progressive people around. So, for them to, I agree with you completely. We are a safer business when
Absolutely.
it comes to that. We can always improve, but
yeah.
The one thing in there, Chief, too, and I use that simple metric of time from ignition to flashover 40 years ago and time from ignition to flashover today. It's incredible when you look at the differences when you talk about construction and when you talk about materials. And I almost say that sometimes I don't know how to quantify it, but I think we've done infinitely better than sometimes maybe the numbers reflect, because the rate of change of materials, construction, and the density of population or density of construction. I mean, look at Louisville now compared to when you were here, Chief, and what we're building and the challenges that we create for the fire service as far as being able to do their job.
Hang on, let Terry finish. Go ahead,
that's
Bobby. Go ahead.
I think that's something that and it's hard. I don't know how to figure that out, but when I look at the number of challenges and I look at what I consider to be overwhelming success, although we do have some numbers like civilian deaths where we don't see this dramatic decrease in a span of 25 years, but the rate of change versus the rate of progress, if you will, I think we've done an incredible job.
Yeah. Bobby, go ahead. You're on mute, bud.
Yeah.
There you go.
So two things, and I think Terry raises a great point, but there's another side to that too. By the time flashover occurs, we all know that anybody in that compartment died long ago because of the toxicity, right? In other words, it's not just the flashover, as Terry brought up, the products of combustion, because they're uniformly polymer based and have been since probably the early 60s, give off so many toxic gases that, and predominantly hydrogen cyanide gas in such quantities that it's not survivable, right? So the get out alive time that Terry was referring to is an infinitely smaller window than it was 70, 60, 70 years ago. Now, it's interesting also when we look at the numbers, because when the NFPA collects its numbers, I hear a lot of folks say, well, 3,000 people and stuff. Remember that's by fire, right? So included in that are wildfires, car fires, anything that caused the person to die from fire. It can be burns, subsequent to a flash from something that wasn't a structure fire. So when we look at death in structure fire, when you break it down, we're doing a great job. Any death is too many. We get that point. But we are doing a really, really good job of rescuing people, educating people, doing all of that. Can we do more? Absolutely. And I think the ISO, to Butchie's point, and the beautiful work he's done over his career, is that what the ISO helps us do is it helps ensure that the tools that firefighters need to do that incredible work are there. Water supply, equipment on the rigs, staffing. So I think it's an amazing organization. They do great work. I've got many friends. Kevin Jarvis and I are old friends. He still works for ISO. So full disclosure, I'm a huge supporter of it. And again, to Butchie's point, everything is relative, right? The cost of housing 30, 40 years ago, the cost of an automobile, the cost of furnishings has all gone up exponentially. So when we're writing bigger and bigger checks, it's because things cost more and more money to replace. And as to cheaper, I think that, the goal of the construction industry is to build affordable housing as best they can with the materials available to them. And are they as durable as dimensional lumber and all of that? No, but we're not going to turn that trend around, and that stock, that inventory, is not going away. What terrifies me, and what I'd like to hear from Butchie and John and everybody else on, is these new modern taxpayer type things where you have, what do you call it? Mercantile or parking on one level, and then it's just basically platform construction 5, 6, 7 stories into the air, just wood frame up into the sky. And when those things go up, we always talk about it all the time here, it's just a matter of time before it's just a really terrible fire in terms of loss of life. John, sorry.
Unmute, John. There you go. Up, turn it up. Do it again. There you go.
Now?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, it says mute on my thing, but anyway, I think one of the problems is, and hope nobody quotes me, one of the problems with science, obviously science is wonderful stuff, but so much of it, and I'm not saying it's done maliciously, so much of it is misapplied. For example, and I'm not picking on Bobby. Bobby just happened to mention something, so it's easy for me to reference what he just talked about. Like the get out time, right? In a room, how flashovers are so much faster now than they were, and even by then, anybody in that compartment is going to be dead. Well, that's wonderful, except that might not be where the people are. The compartment might be the kitchen on the first floor, or the compartment might be a bedroom on the first floor of a house, and all the victims might be on the second floor, and they're far away from there. They're not even experiencing a flashover. So, just measuring flashover time and knowing that somebody that's in the room or in the compartment that's flashing over might very well be dead before we even get there. Well, of course that's true, but without all the numbers on what rooms people die in and how far away from the fire they are, or are they on the fire floor, or are they on the floor above, or 5 floors above, or in the stairway or the public hallway, people die in so many different places in structural fires that using the flashover time, it's true and it's valid, but I don't know, and if somebody knows, please let me know. I don't know what percentage of fire deaths of civilians are immediately affected by flashover time. And I'm here to tell you
that was exactly my point, John. Thank you. That was exactly my point. So it's not a good indicator of anything.
No, it's not a good indicator at all. And another thing is sometimes we start measuring stuff like, oh, look at the flashover time, and it's valid. I'm not saying it's not valid. I don't know how valid it is. I don't know how many fire deaths it has anything to do with. But let's get off the flashover for a minute. Let's talk about if we're talking about time, what are some other things that affect the time between when the fire department gets to a fire, right? Oh, for example, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there was no cell phones. There was just fire boxes and people had a phone in their kitchen somewhere, right? It took a lot longer back then. I would bet my bottom dollar. Now you're gonna have to go get somebody to study this and get a college degree and figure out the numbers, but somebody's gonna have to figure out how long it took to call fires in 40 years ago compared to now. Now, forget it. You can't drop a cigarette on the sidewalk without somebody boop, 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 calling up, and we're on the way. So actually, our responses are starting much earlier now than they used to 40 years ago, which is helping us get there a little bit faster, which is contrary to the impact that the faster flashover is having. All I'm saying is, and I've said this 1,000 times on this topic and many others, from doing a 360 to figuring out if people are inside the building from outside the building. There are so many, there are literally hundreds of factors that have to be looked at, and you can't look at one and make a decision on that. My last comment is, I don't think we're doing a good job. I think there's a lot of room for improvement in rescuing civilians and fires. And I must tell you, that's not based on any scientific results or studies. It's based just on me looking at the numbers, me looking at video. Just go to YouTube and watch 100 pictures of people pulling up to buildings. And I'm saying to myself, where's the search team? I just did a program recently on it. Where's the search team? So many places send the first line in, they send the second line in before they even send a search team in. And if you're doing searches with hose lines, none of us is going to debate the fact that that's a very poor way to do a search, right? So I think there's a lot better way, and I think what Butch is, the numbers that Butch is here to talk about, I think reflect that as well. That there's a lot of room for improvement in the fire service on getting in there, finding the people that need to be rescued and saving them. 3,000 or 4,000 people a year. I find that to be an unacceptable number.
Well, and before Butchie, hang on one second. Terry made a very good point, because I say it all the time. You know, we're not burning the same stuff my old man did in the 50s and 60s when they were firefighter. Contents are different, so on and so forth. And Butch, one of the comments I bring up, and John, you've heard me say, Bobby, you have, and Terry has too, our good friend Sal Marchese. I remember when I was visiting him in Queens, he's on 142 truck, and they just come back from a job, Butch, and good tenement. And there was like, he was describing, he goes, we had fire like out almost every window. And the only window on that side that didn't have fire out, his bucket guy crawled in, drug a guy out. The guy lived. The guy ended up getting a medal for it. The only room that didn't have fire, showing, this goes to the door thing and some other things. But this whole, sometimes I think we're quick to just give up on the, nobody can be alive in there. And I think we're lying to little kids every October, and we tell them, if the smoke detector goes off, even if they hear it, crawl to your door. If the door is hot, don't open it, because the firefighter's coming to get you. Well, they're not coming to get you if we're not going in and getting after them and all the rest of this stuff and giving them a chance, So go ahead, Butch. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was thinking about what Bobby said, and it's all true. But when you look at the statistics, up until 2020, over the last 20 years, about 70,000 people have died due to fire. 80% of them in the homes that they live. 80% of that 70,000 are in the homes that they live. Car fires they're way down. Although with the electric cars, I think they're going to go back up, but that's another story. Vehicle fires are under 100, and then you have commercial buildings, etc. But 80% of the fire deaths of that 70,000 in the last, up until 2020, for the last 20 years, inside their homes. And I've been retired for 10 years. It was in 2 volley departments the whole time. And you know what? Maybe I'm an anomaly, but in my career, I've only seen 2 flashovers. And there are a lot of cities like Jersey City that have the new construction, have all the faster burning, hotter products. But there are still hundreds of thousands of people that live in the after World War II type housing, 5-story walk-ups. And I would venture to say that most of the population in the United States, it's just the demographics, live in the cities, in and around the cities, with the older buildings. So it's fine to say, John. I don't know if you ever tracked it. How many flashovers have you seen in your career?
Yeah. No. Was that a question?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know if I've ever seen a flashover.
Yeah, so
It's usually too smoky.
I used to travel because it's one of the things with this flashover. I think it scared the hell out of the fire service. But when I traveled around for ISO, I hit almost every state. Probably spoke to more firemen and traveled more than most, not every, but most. And after the meetings, we'd go out and have dinner, have a couple of drinks and whatnot, and I'd get off the ISO thing and talk a little bit about fire departments. And I'd always ask, how many of you have had flashovers that injured somebody or caused additional damage to the building? And very seldom did a hand go up. I mean, one or two, over the course of my travels with ISO. And but flashovers are there. I don't doubt it. They happen. But I think the fire service has taken heed. I mean, when you look at the amount of firefighters actually dying inside a burning smoke-filled building, it's way down. As a matter of fact, we had one year, I think it was 2019, there was only one fireman died inside a smoke-filled burning building. Last year, I think it was 5. So I mean, all these things that are happening, I think we've done a good job figuring out how to do it safer. But sometimes I think how we do it safer means slower, and that's the part that I think bothers me a little bit.
Well, and again, there's no argument. Obviously, we said before that the fire service, I just used the example, it was very easy. Just like I said, you take a walk on the exhibit floor at FDIC or in some of the classrooms, even listen to instructors, how far the fire service advanced. Terry brought up a great point. I mentioned it before. There's no argument. There's no arguing, regardless of when the building was built versus newer buildings versus older buildings and all the different stuff. What we're putting inside of them nowadays is different. We John, you and I, we teach in classrooms that are old buildings, and everything they're sitting on, everything they're touching, everything they're leaning on is plastic. Everything we're using is plastic. I mean, it's just, there's a big difference. When we talk, some of these guys get going on legacy furniture, John, your favorite word. And I look at pictures from like the 60s. I wasn't sleeping on hemp and stone and rocks and straw. I mean, like Bobby said, there was plastics and there was rubber and there was things, but there is a difference nowadays in the contents that are burning inside the building compared to what it was, a long time ago. But, I agree with you. I guess my question is, how do we address, and this is always a great topic, or we're talking numbers, and I love Butch, that I love the fact that, because you showed them ahead of time, the numbers are the numbers. 80% or 80% out of almost 70,000 people died inside their homes. I mean, there it is. I mean, that being said, what do we have to do as a fire service as a whole? We go to the conferences, great conferences. We read. Nowadays, to not be interested in the fire service, you actually have to work very hard at it with the apps and the webcasts and the podcasts and the shows and the conferences and the articles and all. In the old days, you picked up a magazine, you read 1 or 3 books, or you went to see Butch Cobb teach a class. What do we, and Butch, you're our special guest. What are your thoughts? We'll start with you. What do we have to do to even make a greater difference on what's going out there fire activity wise with the civilians that you said we put our hands up to the tree? What do we have to do?
Well, one of the things, there was a big push in training, back to basics. Not that, but I think we can't forget why we've been successful over the years. And, the changes are good, but you got to look at, it's kind of like, what's the old adage? Why change it if it's working?
Right.
We could change our equipment and we can have some different strategy and tactics, but, for the fire service, for years and years and years, we've been rescuing people, without, I don't want to get into the science of it, but without hesitating, without doing something else besides going inside. So I just think that, and it's still great that there's a lot of instructors out there. I went to the New York State Chiefs Conference and spoke, and I always stick my head in the door for a few minutes, and it's great that some of the instructors are still speaking about things that we did successfully over the years. not necessarily all the new things, although they're important, but I just think we have to remember what we've done over the years that made the fire service so successful. We've been very, very good at what we've done. And I just hate to see that, kind of go by the wayside. For years I was going to I'm not going to name the group because they'll be over me, but I went to these meetings with some really intelligent, smart chiefs. A lot of them younger. Well, everybody's younger than me now. But I quit going because the last 2 meetings I went to, everybody gets a chance to say something that went around the table for, maybe an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. And I realized not one person in the room talked about a fire, about going through a fire, putting a fire out. It was all, we're just all enveloped now in other things, whether it be diversity or, injuries or other things. And I just quit going because, not that I'm old school, but I like to learn. That's why I'm here. I mean, I like to listen to everybody. I listen to you guys all the time. But you know what? I just, to have a group of chiefs from a lot of different states, and not one person mentioned a fire in their community or what they did or what they how they assessed it or what the changes were going to be.
I
going
think you
forward.
explained that perfectly, Butch, because you said, very intelligent fire chiefs, and we all kind of smiled because that's like when they say military intelligence, how do those words go together? There's some great bosses out there. There are, and some pretty proactive guys, but you're right. And every one of us has talked about how we've kind of strayed, I think, from our mission when it comes to what we're supposed to be doing as a whole for the fire service. And I did a blog for Bobby a while back, I guess what some of the Facebook firefighters, I call them the McCaffrey brothers from Backdraft, they got like a dumpster fire, and they're the first ones to criticize everybody else. Instead of learning from the videos and the pictures and that, they start, I don't know how they call themselves, brothers, sisters, that they MNF other firefighters because they don't like what they did. You know what? You want to say they weren't fast enough getting water or whatever, that's one thing, but you don't trash talk another firefighter like that on social media and call yourself one of ours. But Bobby, there was, and Terry and John jump in this too. The blog I did for Bobby a while back was, I was so sick and tired of seeing people post the most dangerous words of the fire service were because we've always done it that way. We've always done it this way. And I'm like, no, those aren't the most dangerous words in the fire service. We've been doing stuff, how we stretch hose a certain way, how we search, how we do things for a long time. It's worked fine. Rather than get hung up on that phrase, why don't you just change it to stop doing stupid shit? I think the most dangerous words in the fire service are, we never thought it would happen here. And that's what I wrote for Bobby. How many times have we all been at funerals or at departments afterwards or whatever, been involved in a lot of duty and people have leaned over and said, Chief Halton, man, we never thought it would happen here. And that brings back what you said earlier, Butchie, with the training and the apparatus and the equipment and fighting for staffing and cutting response times and doing stuff. You know what I'm saying? There are, real quick, Bobby, there are things that we used to do that I just shake my head, but we used to throw buckets of water, before, after Ben Franklin, created things through Windows too. I mean, we've come a long way. Go ahead, Bobby. I just think, we're talking about the mission and what we got to do to be better at, but go ahead, Bobby. I'm sorry.
Well, as the ombudsman, I wanted to point out that technically the term "we've always done it that way" is only dangerous if you're talking to your wife. then that's a dangerous statement. Then, other than that, yeah. So, but so it's interesting as we talk about this, and I think that having Butchie on, I think it's important that we, obviously the speed of water application, to John's point, that just because one room flashed doesn't mean, there can't be survivable people. We know that if a door is closed, survivability goes up a tremendous amount, even just a simple bathroom door.
It's one of the best initiatives, Bobby, we've ever done in a long time, reminding people to close the door. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I'll just be honest with it. I think that's an interesting construct. Good luck with it. That's all I can say. I'm not for it or against it. I'm agnostic. But where I think it's really interesting, and where I'd like to take the conversation with some of the time with, especially having Butchie on here because of his.
Hang on. I'm looking up agnostic. How did you say that? Agnostic.
Agnostic. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, Bobby. Go ahead.
I apologize for having a vocabulary, but anyway, yeah. Look, so anyway, with Butchie here, 1037 has been out there for a long time, NFPA 1037. And when we talk about life safety, I don't think that a conversation with somebody with as much gravitas as Butchie is well served. Obviously, we can talk strategy and tactics all day long and we've got thousands of people who can do that eloquently. But there are very few people that understand 1037 as well as Butchie does, because basically the ISO that Butchie has so well represented for the last almost 15, 20 years now, really embraces 1037 as a vehicle in order to help them move their message forward. And in 1037, we talk about a lot of investigation. We talk a lot about pre-plan review and things of that nature. So I just wanted to ask a couple of questions of you, Butchie. When we're looking at, participating today, and the reason I like these podcasts is because I don't think a lot of the firefighters understand that you can join the 1037 committee. And in 1037 is where we can make changes about how buildings are constructed. In other words, it's all about life safety and risk reduction. And so, everybody laughs about the R3 code because basically it's the residential fire sprinkler code, which has no teeth, basically common areas, and that's not where the fires start. And basically it just gets the firefighters wet trying to respond to fires that have R3 buildings. But anyway, when we talk about things like 1037, and basically that's the NFPA standard that has to do with basically risk reduction, which is what John's talking about. It's unacceptable that so many Americans are dying in their homes. And I'm not one to put a gun to people's heads, but I think that the more places where we have people that they know that they have options for residential sprinklers, or they have options for higher fire ratings for their garage doors, or higher fire ratings for their interior doors, I think that that's got value, right? Self-closing doors, things of that nature. So Butchie, where do you see, how would you say to someone like John Salka, who's out there, who, has a huge following, how could he help people understand that they can be heard, that they can, a Terry McGrath can join 1037 and make real meaningful difference for people's survivability, even beyond our strategic and tactical approaches, which is, I know what everybody wants to talk about, but man, you've been a guy who's been all about that for 20 years.
Yeah, that's that. When I first went to ISO, one of the first projects they put me on as the chairperson was rewriting the fire suppression rating schedule, not rewriting, but revising. And what was not in there, which shocked me, there were no points for fire prevention. There was no points in there for community risk reduction. So there's a whole new section there now. It's in there.
If you had a Cooper hose jacket, 5 points.
Well, the other thing that I liked, we not that we ditched, well, we did. We sort of ditched the ISO grading of equipment and fire trucks, and we went strictly with the NFPA now. If you go to the website, they follow the NFPA. So that's the second thing that I had an opportunity to voice my opinion for. But you're right about that. One of the other sections that I oversaw for ISO was something called the BSEGs, Building Code Effectiveness Grading Schedule. And ISO grades building departments. If you have a good building department, you can get discounts on your insurance, etc. But being with them and going to meetings, there are millions and millions of dollars being funneled into and cities and towns all over the country are using to mitigate flood, to mitigate wind from hurricanes. There's a huge amount of attention in the insurance industry for that in every place. But when it comes to fire prevention, there's almost nothing. There was somebody, I had several meetings with the U.S. Fire Administrator over the years. And one of the things that I was told twice is of all the money that is given to the fire service through the grant programs, whether it be for manpower or fire trucks or firehouses, there is always money left over at the end of the year, federal dollars, for fire prevention. It's just not all spent. So to your point, Bobby, fire prevention, I wish I'm at the tail end of my career, but fire prevention, I wish is what everybody should be talking about, preventing fires. It just, it's a missed opportunity. I had a meeting, I'll let somebody else talk in a second, but I had a meeting years ago with a group of fire chiefs from Europe, England, and they have a national fire service. But one of the things they were telling me is, I'm trying to remember if it was from Sweden or England, but they start fire prevention classes in the educational system. They start in kindergarten, all the way up until you graduate from their version of high school. There are fire prevention or classes on things that orbit around fire prevention. So by the time you get out of school, it's kind of embedded in your head that it's bad to have a fire. And when you look at the European countries, they don't have many fires at all. I mean, we're probably 5-10 times more in property damage by fires, or just the amount of fires. So there's a lot that we could do in the U.S. It's just not a popular topic. I'm sure that if I come up with a program on risk reduction or how to better, John would have, and went to the FDIC, John would have 100 people in his classroom, and I'd have 5. It's not a popular topic, and it's a shame.
Well, Butch, and one of the things that John and Bobby, you both remember this, Terry, you may remember this too. Do you remember when at FDIC years and years ago, John, you and I were actually sitting next to each other? We're Captain Drennan's. Remember his wife got up there and talked Vini, I think it was Vini, and she unloaded on specifically on the FDNY. She rattled off, remember, John, budget numbers, and you could hear a pin drop when she said, "Shame on you. Shame on you. You spend all this, and you spend it was like this much on fire prevention." To Butchie's point. Go ahead, John.
No, I was just agreeing with you that it was Dina Drennan, and she had a great point. Of course, it was we say it all the time, facts, not emotions. That was an emotional point. This woman lost her husband. So it was an emotional response to her losing her husband, although the facts were all true as well. I think fire prevention would probably be embraced more and practiced more and talked about more if there was some reward for that. In other words, what happens when you get fire prevention? When you start knocking fires down, when you start losing less buildings and going on less runs, the first thing the city manager wants to do is close 3 firehouse and cut staffing to 2. And before you know it, you don't have an adequate force to fight the less frequent but equally dangerous fires. I mean, when we start doing negotiations better in the world, right, between governments, there's less war, there's less conflicts, there's less battles. But everybody doesn't cut their military in half because it still might happen, So I think that's one of the problems.
Well, let me throw this out here to you guys. And Terry, you and I we had plenty of talks over the years. Everybody knows how close Terry and I are, and Louisville fights a buttload of fires over there, and they do a lot of great things, especially on the prevention and education side. And Butch and Bobby jump in here too, especially on this one. We've talked about this in class plenty of times. We've got all the data to show dollar loss. We've got all the data to show lives lost to all the different fires that we brought up, right? The structural, everything else. We have all the data. Where is the tool? Where's the mechanism? Where's the software? I know there's some people out there that have figured it out, but it hasn't really. How do we log? How do we note? How do we detail? How do we write down property and lives saved? So we were so good at the end of a fire and say, John, how many times we talk about this? Well, we estimated dollar loss of this particular house fire. Okay, but what about estimated dollars saved? And it goes back to the whole marketing thing. God bless the cops. Terry, you've been a police officer a long time as well as a firefighter. You were a Dallas cop. We've said it. Law enforcement does a great job at marketing a mission because they go out and scare people of crime, and they get billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars. God bless them. We sit in the firehouse waiting for them to bring the bushel basket of money, John, like they did in It's a Wonderful Life, and dump it on the table, like you said, Butch, the limited funds. What do we have to do to be good at marketing what we're doing? To say, look, to get these people that sit on these boards that argue with us, want to cut staff here, let's just say, wait. Not only do we have this loss, but look at all the property look at what we've saved, whether that's through the alarm system. I don't know how, I know it's a big, gigantic balloon I threw out there, but what do we do to justify that, I guess?
Hey, Rick, there's, and if any of you guys have read this report, there's a report out of the city of Phoenix. It's probably 6 or 7 years old. It was done by the business school at Arizona State. They looked at, I think 6 or 7 commercial building fires in the city of Phoenix and what the outcome would have been. And the report was based on what did we save? And they looked at what the outcome would have been if they weren't deployed as quickly as they were, if they weren't staffed as good as they were, if the apparatus wasn't there, if the training wasn't there. And when I read this report, I use it all the time. I have this class on unintended consequences of less fire protection. But when you look at this report, when it was all said and done, if they weren't as good as they are when they responded to these commercial buildings, it would have cost, I wish I had it in front of me. It would have cost millions of dollars in lost jobs and revenue, not just to the city, but to the county. They went right down to like the guy who delivered water to this one commercial building. If he lost his job, that his company now is getting less dollars, and it was kind of a domino effect. But the report is absolutely incredible, and it's online, and I use it all the time. And people look at this, and not many people do it. Bobby, have you seen it?
Shameless plug. The author his last name is Kreis, and he's Steve Kreis's son. I believe it's Chris Kreis, or anyway, it's Kreis. He's currently a battalion chief with the Phoenix Fire Department, but he's my good friend Steve, his dad. This is his kid who's already a battalion. That's how old we are, John. Our kids, like your son's a major now, my son's a commander. His kid's now battalion chief. So our kids are now in the roles that we were once in. But so anyway, he wrote an article for us, shameless plug. If you put the last name Kreis, Kreis, I believe, in the fire engineering search engine, you'll get the article by the original article that he wrote, which became the premise of that larger study. So he wrote an article about property save, and and a lot of other people had said that over the years. Why don't we talk about what we saved? But he really got into it. And then with this group of people that he formed, and I believe it was the basis of his master's or someone's master's or maybe PhD, they did a much larger in-depth study. And you're right, Butchie, they looked at the impact on the grocery stores and the impact on the taxes being collected, and they really did a great job. And it was interesting. A fire that we normally would list as, say, $1 million loss turned out to have an economic impact of literally exponentially higher. In other words, it was 10 or $20 million in real financial impact because of everything that cascaded from that point on. And it's an amazing piece of work. And yet it's kind of wonky, and so folks. But the articles by Steve are not. So if you Google Kreis, Kreis, and as an author in our search engine, his pieces should come up. I'll try doing, or I'll ask Pete. Pete, if you're listening, if you could see if you could find some of those pieces by and link them to this conversation so folks could see those articles. But there's a great argument, and to John's point too, is you often get that, well, if we get fires, and maybe the fact that we call it fire prevention, maybe we should just call it fire safety education, or fire safety training, because it's really not, prevention. Our guy, if you prevent fires, we won't have jobs. That's not true. There's so many things, as John said, that go into the things that cause fire. Could be a plumber sweating pipe. It could be a bad electrical wire. I mean, Terry did investigations for years, and he's trained in investigations. And I believe you even had an arson dog, didn't you, for a while, Terry? So, he can tell you there's a gazillion ways that fires are going to happen, are going to continue to happen. And with the proliferation of more and more electronics, I go into even my kids' apartments and my family's homes, and they got these, remember when we used to yell at people, John, for overloaded, plugs? Now they sell things that help you overload the plug. And my kids had overloaded plugs on top of overloaded plugs. I'm like, you're adding plug things to the plug things.
Well,
so I think that,
go ahead.
I don't think we're ever going to put ourselves out of business. I think that that's a straw man argument. Not to use another big term, but it's a false argument. In other words, we're never going to put ourselves out of business. The fire service is never going away. There's always going to be fire, and we're always going to need well-trained, well-staffed, well-disciplined, firefighters. Period. I believe that, you know, and I haven't been wrong yet, except on that, you know, advising John on that haircut thing. That was a problem. But,
But Bobby,
but to finalize my point,
go ahead.
what we're talking about, whether it's NFPA 1037, whether it's the ISO, we need somehow to understand that, you know, for years people were like, oh, we don't do EMS. Now everybody's like, yeah, I'm proud to be a paramedic. I'm proud to be an EMT. I'm proud to save people's lives any way I can, whether it's CPR, whether it's blood sugar, I don't care. We need to say life safety education. You're damn right. I'm all about it. I don't want anybody to have to suffer a fire in their home, in their business, in their car, ever. Fire sucks. Just like we have the cancer sucks t-shirts, we ought to have fire sucks, you know, meaning the actual event of fire.
Well, and I don't want something to kind of escape us here, Bobby. And I want to point this to Terry. But Terry Butch made a comment a while ago about whether it was Sweden or somewhere over there about them educating from kindergarten up, right? You know, and throwing things in there about, you know, fire prevention, you know, educating children like we've learned from the beginning. Let's start at the beginning and where it's just a way of life. Terry, you and I've talked for years. I think you and I lost track of how many awards we gave out to little kids that saved the life of one of their friends or one of their family members because of something they learned in school when our fire prevention, our pub ed clowns went out and did a skit. And it wasn't as detailed, Butchie, as that, you know, as a regular curriculum. But Terry, just the visits to the schools, remember?
Yeah, but it's you know, it's funny. Chief Mark Lee over in Richardson or Garland, sorry, Mark, over in Garland, but he made a comment one day that I laughed, and the more I thought about it, and I thought, man, it makes sense. But he said, you know, I got 250 guys on the payroll that I pay to put fires out, and I got 7 people on the payroll that prevent fires. And he goes, something's wrong with this, you know, and honestly, that's a really kind of a sobering fact that where we do spend a lot of resources. And I don't want to be taken out of context here, but I thought that was, you know, the other part I think that makes this specific or incredibly challenging is it's really hard to, I don't want to say hard to measure. It's hard to measure what never happens. And it's certainly less sexy and less interesting. And you know, I've used this analogy a lot because we as a fire service, and certainly the FDNY is facing a monumental event, you know, to memorialize an event that's coming up. And everyone understands that event because in some way, shape, or form, whether you're in Louisville, Texas, or you're FDNY, you have some kind of connection to it if you're in this business and it means something to you. A lot of people had tangible, you know, a link to that event. Years later, the FBI does a sting in downtown Dallas, and they did this elaborate deal with a terrorist that wanted to buy a car bomb. They drove it into the basement of that big neon, you know, the big green neon bank building down there. And the FBI guy was with the terrorist guy. They got in the getaway car, and as he's driving away on the streets of downtown Dallas, he's mashing the button. Well, it didn't happen. It was all an undercover deal. That's a huge story, and I still think about it to this day. But you know what? It made one round of the news cycle because nothing happened. But the significance of the work that went into doing that is monumental. But I don't know how to get, you know, how do you get people to latch on to that?
Well, and I, you know, I didn't mention this first out. When you say everyone has a significant kind of, so many people have such a tie to 9/11 and what happened. We had the 20th anniversary. You know, our good friend, our special guest today, Chief Butch Cobb, was standing there, I think, next to the globe when the first tower collapsed. I mean, Butch, you were talking to guys that were gone a second later. You were there. You responded right away from Jersey City Mutual Aid. You know, you guys brought a dispatcher. You know, Butch, I know you know, not to get going on necessarily the 20-year anniversary because we need another couple hours to do that, but Chief Cobb was right there when it fell. The first one, I mean, he was right. I don't even know how you're alive today with where you were standing. John has talked about. John has said before, Butch Cobb should never survive 9/11. You know, a lot of people forget Jersey City's right there. You were there pretty quick, but I mean, I just want to mention there's a significant tie there, Butch.
Yeah, no, it was the North Tower, the first tower had fallen already, but there were four of my guys were helping get people out, and they survived both collapses. Four of my guys that were over there with the mass service unit. Yeah, I got there just a little bit later when the North Tower fell. But, sorry. Yeah, so yeah, 20th anniversary is coming up, and I'm going to fly back and hang out with John and a couple of guys. But I just want to get back to what we talked about at the beginning real quick. You know, the amount of people that died and what we are doing and not doing now with some new strategy and tactics. You know, so somebody, I was at New York State Chiefs a few weeks ago, and we were sitting around at night, and one of the guy with a lot of experience, he said to me, "Hey, Butch," he said, "You know what? You know, if a fireman was trapped in that building, would we do something other than go in and get him?" And it made me start thinking, you know, about when I was a volunteer chief, I got to almost every working fire in my community first. And a couple times I crawled into a living room or a dining room. There were cars in the driveway, etc. And my second volunteer department, we'd have a unit show up with, you know, it might have been the rescue first, or we had a small ladder truck without any hose or anything. And I'm just, you know, if these guys went in and got trapped, what would we do to save them? You know what? We would throw a host of people in there looking for a fireman trapped in a building. So I just kind of relate that to, you know, when we pull up to a fire nowadays, are we doing the same thing or are we not?
Well, and that goes back to my point, and everybody on this panel agrees. You know, the faster it comes down to training, that the faster we can deliver water to the seat of the fire, the faster we are at stretching hose. John, how many times you and I've said it? The only thing that really matters on your pumper is the hose and water. Granted, I know we do EMS, but a paramedic lung to all that different stuff. You know, we had all this other equipment, but there were hose tenders and ladder tenders and a pump in the old days that they drug around. There, you know, how good it goes back to the videos. God bless the videos, but getting frustrated watching people that can't stretch hose. They can't stretch hose off an engine to a fire. Points to what you said, Butchie, originally about, you know, the training part of it, that aspect, and so on and so forth. Go ahead, John. You had something. I'm sorry. You're muted, buddy. You're muted, John.
Well, while John's getting unmuted, I'll say the reason they can't is because they were at the wrong conference. Just like Butchie Cobb, they should have been at FDIC, damn it. And until you correct your behavior, we can turn this Humpday Hangout around right now. We looked at stretching hose. As a matter of fact, we had a class called Stretching for Success. We had several classes on stretching hose. So if you attend the proper conferences in the future, young man, let this be an admonishment to you, young Mr. Cobb. Just kidding.
Ahead,
I also, just so everybody knows, I posted an article from Tom Brennan that he wrote in 1996 about the very topic that Battalion Chief Christ wrote about almost 15 years later. Tom wrote an editorial about it. So I hope folks that are listening can go take a look at those articles. And even Tom Brennan back then was saying, you know, it's called We Only Lose. And he said, we should look at what, you know, we saved. So pretty cool. Sorry.
Great topic. Go ahead, John.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. You know, you guys are talking about fire prevention, and this is another theme, another discussion, another issue that's been talked about so many times about, Terry, you mentioned how many people, hundreds of people in suppression and 7 people in prevention, right? And every fire department's like that, whether they're small volunteer, small career, large career departments. The number between the people that are doing suppression and the people that are doing prevention is always gigantic, if not obscene. Sometimes it's like one fire marshal and a secretary, and then the rest of the department is 7 or 8 or 10 or 20 stations, and there's no other people. My point is, I think sometimes we're talking to the wrong crowd. You know, like Marines are really not interested in peace negotiation. You know, the Marines in infantry units are not interested in peace negotiations. Firefighters in general, and Rescue 3 and Squad 1 and 48 Engine are not really interested in, you know, fire prevention education or teaching kids how to close the windows or close the doors or be careful with extension cords. You know what? You know, we get a lot of programs in this country, executive fire officer and many others. This is a top of the pile issue. If this is going to change, it's not going to change in the firehouse. You're not going to have some lieutenant come in and say, "Hey guys, I just had a great idea. How about instead of stretch and hose today, how about we go out to the middle school and teach those kids how to be real careful at home?" You know, the guy's going to get pummeled with bagels and things. You know, like it's not an issue for the people that are fighting fire. People fighting fires, people that are fighting wars. They're interested in the tactics and the procedures and the strategies. That's their job. If this is going to change, it's going to have to change at the upper levels of the fire service. It's going to have to change at the executive fire officer level where people are trained and indoctrinated into being chiefs. And those are the people. The chief says, yeah, why do I only have 7 people? You're asking me why you only have 7 people in fire prevention? You're the damn fire chief. If it's going to change, the fire chiefs are going to have to change it. It's not something that's going to get changed by battalion chiefs or captains in the field. I mean, we're the people that are going to be doing it eventually, but it's going to have to be changed at the top levels of the fire service.
Well, Terry, you and I've seen this where when they shuffle fire prevention around, and not to knock any particular city, I won't mention, but there's been cities out there that say, well, we're going to take fire prevention from the fire department and we're going to stick it under community development because we want the one-stop shop thing. And they'll still be wearing the uniform, but they're going to be at City Hall. And all of a sudden there's this immediate disconnect between, I know when I got to Louisville, Terry, the fire marshal was not part of us. And we even tried attending meetings. There was this gigantic disconnect between what's going on in the community and what we're doing. We were still doing public education. And then, so you've got that where they kind of shuffle and move it around. And then John, and to the whole panel, what's always been frustrating over the years, and I've used it to save guys' careers, I have to admit it, but we tend to stick people. Well, we'll send him to fire prevention. He can't fight fires anymore. He hurt his back. So let's just stick him in fire prevention. And let's stick him in. And as much as I have used that to save guys' careers, I think regardless of the numbers and how many people you have in it, because John is a very valid point, but like Terry brought up, I think we need to get serious about it. John, you guys got serious in the FDNY about building inspections because what happened at the Deutsch building, right? Everything changed in New York City. Tell me it didn't when those 2 firefighters got killed and how you guys did. Explain that real quick, John. What happened after those firefighters got killed when it came to BIs in New York City? You're muted, buddy.
Obviously, New York City is doing a lot more fire prevention and always has been than most other departments, just because of the size of it and it's been around for so long. I mean, every fire company in New York City, from all my time on the job, which this year would have been 42 years, has been doing 2 days a week, 3 hours each period. That's 6 hours a week per company out on building inspection. They call it BI, they call it apparatus field inspection duty. They rename it every couple of years. But then when the Deutsche Bank building happened, I don't recall the exact process. There was a lawsuit involved the union and the city and the building. And it turns out that a ruling was made that the fire department had to increase their inspection even more. Now it's 3 days a week. Engine 48, 75 engine, 25 truck, every single truck and engine, 240 engines, 140 trucks. They all go out 3 times a week now. 3 hours each period. That's 9. You can round it off to 10. I did the math when I was still working because I tried to figure it out. 700,000 man hours per year in New York City Fire Department is dedicated to building inspection. And, 20, 30 years ago, maybe we used to go out and spend an hour and a half and then go shopping for lunch and come back. Now it's really enforced from the first minute till the last minute. No coming home early, no going out late. 700,000 man hours. That's a lot of hours. New York City spends a lot of hours on building inspection and reviewing buildings and looking at them and pre-planning and stuff like that. So there's really no excuse for anybody to not be doing it. And you can tie it into what we do too. I always used to tell guys, when we're out on building inspection, pretend we're out on a drill. How would we stretch hose in this building, even though we're really there just to inspect it, And that's just the reality. The reality is that's a model that a lot of people can follow. And there's some places that don't spend 1 hour a week. They don't have 1 hour a week of official building inspection duty by field units, which is really a crime as well.
Well, let me throw this out there, and I get once in a while I get teased because I'm a big history buff in the fire service, and Bobby, you're Glennie Corbett, your guy. I mean, I'm very passionate with Glennie. We talk history, and John, you've heard me say it umpteen times, Terry, about what it is and training firefighters and what it is and reviewing certain incidents and so on and so forth when it comes to the history of the fire service. And I always bring up the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, John, on all these little girls that jumped. Some of them, if you read Jay Jonas's, it took me like 3 times because I'll be honest with you, I cried reading some of it. Little girls were on fire, plummeting to their death, crashing through the cellar windows, starting a cellar on fire, fire escapes collapsing because of blocked, chain, and all the problem with the exits. So if anything, when you start reviewing these incidents with your young firefighters, but you talk about, let's go back to kindergarten for a firefighter, the fire academy, if that you want to do that. All of a sudden now when you go on an EMS run and you see a blocked door exit, instead of Captain Jones saying, yeah, we'll let fire prevention know we get back. You know what they do now? Because they get it. They go, no, sir, ma'am, are you the manager? Come with us. We'll even help you. This has to be opened up right now. We cannot leave till this exit. This whole back door is all blocked. And I don't want to sound mean, but the fire marshal is going to be out here to double check later, like today and this week. Because all of a sudden now they get it. They saw there's nothing new about killing people in the way of, blocked or impeded exits, means of egress and stuff like that. All of a sudden now, because we shared a god-awful horrific incident, now young firefighters are going, Captain Salka, what, did you see that? Shit, I didn't see that. All right, let me go get the manager. We're going to get this open. Like you said, Jeff, we're going to get this open right now. We don't wait to go back and tell fire prevention because you know what? Tick, 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 that kind of stuff. I just think that's another avenue. If we go out there and we attempt to educate our young firefighters more on some of the losses of life and why, and a simple thing of when you're out there, keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, you know what I'm saying? Pay attention to stuff and correct it while you're there. Maybe the suppression companies can be a little bit more aggressive at what they take care of when they're out there instead of just picking up and leaving. We did simple things, Terry, like if the smoke detector went off because of burnt food, we didn't leave until we made sure the battery was fresh, or we put a new smoke detector up for them because that could have been the end of the battery or whatever. Go ahead, John.
Hey, you know what? That reminds me. I remember the program you did, and I probably don't remember exactly correctly, but you guys in Louisville, with the press, you had your own little press academy, right? Where you would invite the reporters from the press to come in and sort of train them about what firefighters really do and what the risks are, and it's air in the bottle, not oxygen, and all this other stuff, right? And then the benefit to them was they were able to get to a little bit of a forward, press box when there was a fire, right? What about if a fire department ran a store owner or a merchant's fire academy and tried to show people why we want the aisles to be 30 inches wide, why we don't want stockpiled right up to the bottom of the sprinklers, why we don't want exits locked in the back, even though it's just a delivery door, and show them pictures of fires and the results of people getting killed and stores burning down. That alone, even if you just had a couple of people instructing a whole bunch of merchants on that might get some self-compliance going,
Exactly. Well, hey, you know what? And that's another great point. And I just looked while John was talking. We're a little over with our time wise. Bobby's always been gracious, and Pete would let us extend it when we get on a roll with things. But we probably need to look at closing things. This is another great discussion. We could have done this for hours. This is having a drink or having a cup of coffee and talking like we always do about this stuff. I guess, Butch, we always try at the end of the show especially with our special guests like yourself, as we wrap things up, what would be this topic, Fire in America, everything we talked about, what would be your advice to, whether it's the fire chief or the firefighters out there, what we've been talking about? What would be your advice, Butch?
Well, like I said at the beginning, I was thrown into a data world when I was asked to take over a position as national director for ISO, and here's something that I think it holds true today. ISO has a website for every fire chief in the country. There's some 50,000 different fire departments and districts. And that website, every fire chief in the country can sign on to and have access to all the data ISO has for every year they've been there, whether it's 30 years or 20 years or 10 years or 5 years. All that data is there, and it's a wonderful resource. And I started a newsletter with ISO. We sent out to 40,000 fire departments and insurance industry, and we got a few thousand, but every fire chief in the country should sign into that website. Just go to the www.iso, and there's a link there. You have to prove you're a fire chief. There's some way of doing that. It takes like a day, but you can have all that data available to you. I just think it's a little plug to ISO, but it's for fire chiefs out there. This is the world we're in. You know, and the other thing is, just real quickly, don't forget about what got us to where we are now. There are things that we've done over the years. I'm not talking about tradition or anything like that, but just in strategy and tactics that have worked and have always worked. And we shouldn't forget about that. We shouldn't try to change that. So that's my 2 words of wisdom, my 2 opinions.
Well, I like the fact that data is there because fire chiefs need to know that, because we do, I'll just say it and I'll move on. We do a horrible job at training fire chiefs in marketing. We don't teach them how to market our mission. Certain places we do, but we stand up against, I'll just say, I love law enforcement. They have actual whole academies and programs that show them how to go out and market with their data. And we do a pretty important. Butch, if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, to talk to you, to have you come out and teach, because besides this stuff and tactics and all the rest of stuff, all the things you do on leadership and, what's the best way? Is it email best way for them to get a hold of you, Butch?
Yeah, email is www.rescueboss@hotmail.com, and it's RESQBOSS@hotmail.com.
Perfect.
And I'm on Instagram also. We just put in Chief Cobb or Robert Cobb, and it'll pop up on Instagram. And anybody has a question or a comment, I will certainly get back to them.
Perfect. Reach out to Chief Cobb, will you? If you want to make a difference in your department, your community, on a whole slew of topics, please reach out to Butchie. Bobby, closing thoughts as we run through the panel here?
Yeah, real quick, Nick Salama, who's a great friend of ours, he had a great question. I just want to cover it really quickly. He said, fire protection begins at the architect. The fire service needs to measure the public, but creating an acceptance of building construction works against public safety. It's a great question. It's up on the Facebook page. So Nick, to your point, get involved in the ISO, get involved in the ICC, get involved in the NFPA. That's, if you want to make a difference, that's where you really make a difference. The architects and building construction people are constrained by compliance with those codes. And if you really want to make a difference, we've got to get more active at that level. And it's not hard to do. It's time consuming and it requires homework and work, but it's good work, and you become a better firefighter for it because you learn a great deal. So contact the ICC, contact the NFPA, get a hold of the folks at ISO and find out how you can become more involved. And that I would just add that. The other thing I would say is I want to say thank you to Butchie. We got Veterans Day coming up pretty soon here, and I want to thank him for his service. He's a decorated combat veteran from the Vietnam War, and besides all of his other accomplishments as a incredible firefighter, he's basically dedicated his entire life to his country and to his fellow man, and it's just been an honor to be able to sit with you again, as always. Even if you did go to the wrong damn conference, I still love you. You're forgiven.
Hey Bobby, I'm gonna change that, but just one quick thing. You don't have to answer it now, but how many rules did you and I break helping that fire department put out the fire in the
That's a real quick true story. Butch and I, we're teaching together out in some town in the South. I won't mention their name, and they have a job, and they asked us if we wanted to come along and watch. And things were going so horribly south so fast that both of us just grabbed some gear, freaking grabbed lines. Butchie was laddering and working on the outside. I grabbed the line on the inside, and basically we went to work with those guys. And oh yeah, we broke federal, state, local. We broke them all. Yeah.
Back in the day, right? Back
in the day, man. And we put the fire, we had a great time and put the fire out, and it turned into a hands-on training class, right, Butchie? It was hysterical, man. We were out there till midnight and we had a great time.
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, you said it very eloquently about Butch's service. That was very nicely said. John, closing thoughts?
No, it's a great topic. It's not always the most inspirational, but it certainly is important. And I think the effects are long-reaching. And Bobby and Butch, I hope you didn't store that dirty gear inside the crew cab when you went back to the firehouse.
I'm still wearing it.
Hey, John, next time I come to your house, I'm going to clean the helmet up in your room.
Well, like we said, we Terry and I, John sent numerous emails for the longest time, we got to get Butch. We got to get Butch. So I was so happy we finally got Butch on the show. Terry, closing thoughts there, buddy. And thank you to my partner, Terry McGrath, for sometimes folks, we need to get things churning, and one of us either has to throw the grenade or throw the grenade and fall on top of it. And Terry threw the grenade out there to get things going at the beginning. But Terry, closing thoughts, buddy.
The just specific to ISO, and I would tell anyone out there, I'm a data driven person. I'm really analytical, and that drives people crazy. But I like it, but I also find an incredible amount of value in it. But I will tell you this, that when in my position here at the fire department, I spend a majority of my time trying to convince other people of the things we need, the money we need, the resources we need. And that's where ISO is really your friend, because we live and die by this stuff. And I know that as a line firefighter, I could care less about any of this. Like I think Chief Salka was alluding to, of what you're focused and interested in. And I get all that. But I will tell you this, that it explains a lot of why we mandate the people, why they do what they do, how they do it. But I'm telling you, if you're going to go out there, do capital projects, put a fire station somewhere, figuring out how to run, what kind of apparatus, the staffing, do your homework, because it's a frustrating thing to get into a situation where you've invested a lot of time, effort, resources, energy into going down a road with a strategy, and then find out that you're not getting the best benefit, or maybe you could have tweaked it and done it a little bit different. So anyway, that when he mentioned the amount of data that they have, that's inherent in the insurance business, is that they are the data. They started data mining way back before there was Facebook or Twitter or anything else, man. They got the numbers. So anyway, it's a great resource, and embrace them and use them to your advantage.
Well, especially from your side, Terry, I know when we were together and we worked together, you were the money guy besides everything else that you did. I mean, you were the budget guy, and that's how we exist. And going in there and fighting for what we need and all that, like you said, you got to have that stuff. Terry, if they want to get a hold of you, best email?
I'm at the City of Louisville, T McGrath at cityoflouisville.com.
Perfect. Bobby, I always say, if they want to get a hold of you, just turn to the front page or inside the magazine there, and they can get a hold of you. Now, and real quick, Bobby,
or read the Mustang Club of America magazine, where Grace has won another gold.
The Mustang, yeah, his Mustang. But Bobby, before we close things out, we don't have that much time. But oh my God, John, you and I turned around at opening ceremonies in this month at FDIC Indy, and we both looked and went, "Holy crap, man!" I mean, forget a pandemic. The room was packed, and the hallways were just, people were bumping. I seriously, 20,000+ people. And I'm like, forget a pandemic. Firefighters were loving it. There was great classes. There was great programs.
Presentations couldn't have been better. They couldn't have been better. They were spot on. They were even better than spot on.
Exactly. The weather, John, cooperated, and it just got, Bobby, it was awesome. And I can't wait for April, buddy. It's coming up. So I know you always tell them, I'll tell them for you. Start as soon as you can, man. When they open it up, start signing up for classes. As soon as they open up housing, get everything going, because April will be here. And if you thought August was huge, just wait until April when it comes to how many people are going to be there. So
our registration is already 110% over what it was at this show. And same thing with vendors signing back up. The show was phenomenal. The folks that presented, whether it was Steve or the Conleys or John Austin, it was just everybody just hit it out of the park. Wait till you see next year. It's going to be equally as phenomenal. The Lifetime by Mike Dugan was just breathtaking. And if you think that was something, where do you see the Lifetime for John Salka? I've already got like 10 people have already sent me things they want to be included in the John Salka comments. And I'm like, for the love of goodness, you send me less than a Tolstoy novel if you want to be included. Get it down to a paragraph. I swear to God, I got one guy sent me a thing. Well, heck, here, this is it. Look at this thing. that's a letter about John. I'm like, dude, give me a paragraph. Give me a paragraph. Don't give me, the thing goes on for 3 pages. I'm like, forget it. No, a paragraph. So anyway, John, congratulations. And I can't wait to have you and the family there. It's well deserved. And I think that I couldn't imagine, you always have that bucket list, the things you want to get done, and to be able to see you get lifetime achievement and be there is something that, they say there's things worth living for. That's worth living for. So.
Wow. Congratulations on next year's Lifetime Achievement Award recipient, John Salka, Chief John Salka. Well deserved, buddy. Hey, Butchie, thank you so much. God bless you. We're so excited to have you on the show. We're all on Facebook, folks, Twitter, YouTube, all the different Instagrams. A lot of those things. Terry had to bug out. He's got to go to a meeting. You get a hold of us on like I said, emails or any of those deals there. Our next show date is September 15th. We always mention this. Fire Engineering always has some great Humpday Hangouts on Wednesdays at noon Central Time. And then all our podcasts in the evening throughout the week are phenomenal with some great people. And I'm talking about men and women that will answer your emails and reach out to you and help you and stop in the hall. It's just an amazing group of folks that do all this with fire engineering. It's just an honor to be with them. In closing, we always ask you, and this is perfectly fitting with what our soldier Butch Cobb and John's sons as Marines and Bobby and mine. We always ask you, especially right now, my God, please keep the men and women serving our armed forces in your thoughts and prayers. And remember this, especially with the 20th anniversary coming up of 9/11, never forgetting means never forgetting. Be safe. God bless you. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you.